She slid the resignation letter into the plain white envelope at 8:29 in the morning, and her hands did not shake once. That is where this story begins. Not with the betrayal, not with the stolen credit, not with the years of silence. It begins with a woman who had already decided, had already built, had already won, and was simply completing the final move on a board the men around her never even knew they were playing on. Her name was Adizun. She was 34. She had worked 7 years at Hansung Capital Group in Seoul, a mid-sized asset management firm that had made considerably more money because of her brain than anyone inside that building was willing to say out loud. Adiz was a quantitative analyst. She had grown up in Lagos in a household where her father kept a whiteboard in the kitchen for math problems he left unsolved on purpose, to see which of his children would finish them before breakfast. She finished them every morning, before her rice went cold. She had moved to Seoul on a research fellowship at 24, stayed for a master's degree, stayed for the job, stayed because the work was good and the city was hers now too, a city of late nights and pojamika fried snacks and the particular gray of the Han River in November that she had somehow decided she loved. At Hansung, she had built something extraordinary. She had built the Nipo Volatility Index, a proprietary risk model that the firm had licensed to 3 institutional clients in Japan and 1 in Singapore. The licensing agreement generated 11 million won per quarter. Her name was not on the licensing agreement. She had never mentioned it. She had gone back to her desk the day she found out and opened a new spreadsheet. That was Adizun. She did not spend her energy on noise. She spent on construction. Then came the Monday she applied for the head of analytics position. By Wednesday, her direct manager, a man named Park Juno, had gone to lunch with the division director, Oh Seongmin, without inviting her. She noticed. She said nothing. She went back to her desk and finished the quarterly stress test model 3 days early. Oh Seongmin called her into his office on a Thursday afternoon. He said words like executive presence. He said gravitas. He gestured with one hand toward the space between himself and Adiz, as if the problem lived in the air between them and not inside the assumptions he had brought into the room. The committee, he said carefully, felt that the candidate selected brings a certain command to the room. Adiz looked at him. She said, I understand. She stood. She thanked him for his time. She walked to the kitchen on floor 9. She made herself a plain Americano, and she stood at the window looking at the Seoul skyline for exactly 4 minutes. Then she went back to her desk. She opened a folder on her desktop titled, simply, Tjigig, Exit Plan. She had started that document 8 months ago, the first time Park Juno had presented her risk analysis in a client meeting, and Oh Seongmin had thanked him for it by name while she sat 3 seats away. She had not been building dreams. She had been building infrastructure. The company Adiz had been quietly constructing for 9 months was a financial analytics consultancy called OA Strategies. It was a registered business entity. It had an operating account. It had 2 pilot clients she had taken on during evenings and weekends, a Korean-Nigerian trade finance company based in Incheon, and a Lagos-headquartered commodities fund that had been referred to her through her father's old business network. Both had already renewed for a second quarter. She had told no one at Hansung, not even her closest colleague. That colleague was CEO Minji. Minji had been at Hansung 6 years. She was sharp in the way that people who have survived corporate environments learn to be sharp, not loudly, not performatively, but with a precise and careful attention to everything happening in every room. She had been at a client call on floor 11 when the Thursday meeting happened. She found out at 5:15 p.m. from the company-wide email Oh Seongmin sent announcing that the head of analytics role had been filled internally by a candidate with strong executive presence. Minji read that email twice. She walked to Adiz's desk. She did not say, I'm sorry. She did not say, that's not fair. She sat in the chair beside Adiz's monitor and said one thing. How long had you been building something? Adiz looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, long enough. What happened next is what separates this story from every other story about a woman who was overlooked. Adiz did not leave in anger. She did not leave in haste. She did not leave in any way that could be described as anything other than completely, almost frighteningly prepared. The man who was given the head of analytics role was named Choi Byung-soo. He started on a Monday. By Thursday, he had come to Adi's desk 3 times to ask questions about the models he was now responsible for. She answered every question, completely, professionally, with the full depth of 7 years. She answered every question because it was her job, and she was not going to do her job poorly because the institution had failed to recognize what her job actually was. That was not who she was. That had never been who she was. 31 days before she planned to leave, an email arrived in Adi's personal inbox. It came from the office of Kwon Jae-sung, the group chairman. Subject line, Introduction. She read it at her desk, without changing her expression. She replied within 4 minutes. She accepted the meeting for the following Tuesday. She had never been to the 32nd floor. Kwon Jae-sung's assistant showed her in at 10 in the morning. The room had floor-to-ceiling glass on every wall, the Han River visible in all directions, the particular quiet of rooms where large decisions are made. Kwon stood and shook her hand and said, "I've been looking at the Nipo Volatility Index for 2 years. I understand you built it." She said yes. He said, "I want to understand how." She said, "How much time do you have?" He said, "As much as you need." She was in that office for 1 hour and 45 minutes. She explained the model from first principles. Kwon asked 12 questions. Every answer made the next question more specific. That was when she knew he understood exactly what he was looking at. Meanwhile, Minji had been quietly working on Adi's behalf in ways that never appeared on any document. Minji had 3 things Adi's did not yet have: a contact at the Korean business press, a relationship with the head of the Seoul CFO network, and a precise memory of every meeting where a man had presented Adi's work and received credit for it. She had written none of these things down. She did not need to. 22 days before Adi's plan to leave, an email arrived from a journalist at the Korea Economic Review, introduced through Minji's press contact, asking to profile her new firm. Adi's filed the email. The timing was not right yet. 14 days before she planned to leave, Kwon Jae-sung sent her a calendar invite directly, not through his assistant. Subject line, Strategic Discussion. Minji leaned across the aisle and said quietly, "He doesn't send his own calendar invites." And Adi said, "I know." That second meeting lasted 2 hours and 19 minutes. Kwon asked her what she would do with the quantitative division if it were hers. She told him. 17 minutes of uninterrupted response. He did not stop her once. He wrote 5 things down. On the morning she planned to submit her resignation, Adi's arrived at 8 o'clock. She made her Americano. She went to her desk. On her desk sat a small framed document, face down for 9 months. She turned it face up for the first time. Her OA Strategies business registration certificate. She looked at it for 10 seconds. Then she opened her resignation letter. For sentences. She had written it 11 months ago and changed nothing. She printed 1 copy, placed it in a plain white envelope, walked to O.C. Ongman's office at 8:31 a.m. He was on the phone. She waited. He finished. She placed the envelope on his desk and said, "I'm grateful for the time here." And she left. O.C. Ongman opened the envelope. He read it once. He called Park Juno. Park Juno read it and said, "She'll land somewhere. She's good, but she'll land somewhere." And O.C. Ongman said nothing, because he had just read 4 sentences that told him almost nothing about what she was going to. And that silence was the first thing that concerned him. Her last day was a Friday. She completed every open deliverable. She wrote clear handover notes for every model she maintained. Clean, thorough, nothing missing. She had written them to be sufficient. She trained no one in person. The notes were sufficient. At 5:47 p.m., she picked up the framed OA strategy certificate, placed it in her tote, shut down both monitors, and walked to the stairwell, where Minji was waiting. Minji said, "I'll see you out there." Adi said, "Yes, you will." She started at her own desk on Monday. Nokimute, her apartment in Mapo, double monitors, plain desk, Americano. 3 client deliverables due by Wednesday. She was at her desk at 7 in the morning. She had not slept past 6:30 in 11 months. She was not about to start. The Korea Economic Review profile ran 5 weeks after she left. For pages, the headline read, "The analyst who built the model, then built the firm." Minji sent her the link at 6:09 a.m. Adiz read it over her coffee, then forwarded it to her 4 clients with a single line, "Sharing for your awareness." Oh Seong-min read the article at 8:11 a.m. from his office. He read it all the way through. He recognized the Nipo Volatility Index cited on the second page, the model he had allowed to be presented in division meetings without her name for 3 years. He set his phone down. He did not call anyone. Kwon Jae-sung had read it before Oh Seong-min did, at 6:44 a.m. from his home in Yongsan. He had already known it was coming because he and Adiz had spoken by phone 2 days before it published. He read it anyway, then called his executive assistant and said, "Please clear my Tuesday afternoon." By the end of that Monday, Adiz had 4 new inquiry emails in her business inbox. She answered all of them before 6 p.m. She was thorough. She was not hurried. She had been ready for this week for a long time. Park Juno found the article Tuesday morning from a colleague's forwarded message. He read the section about the Nipo Volatility Index. He read it twice. He thought about the number of times he had cited that model in client presentations without attributing it to anyone. He opened a new browser tab. He did not say anything to anyone. On Tuesday afternoon, Kwon Jae-sung called Adiz directly. He said, "I've been thinking about our conversations." She said, "So have I." He said, "I want to propose something." She said, "I'm listening." She picked up her pen. She opened her notebook. She was ready before he finished his first sentence. The proposal was a strategic advisory contract. OA Strategies as a named external firm, consulting on quantitative model architecture for a new Hansung product line. Full credit. Firm name on the deliverables. Adiz asked 3 clarifying questions. Kwon answered all 3 directly. She said, "I'll have terms to you by Thursday." She sent the terms on Thursday at 9 in the morning. He signed and returned them by noon. She saved the signed agreement in a folder titled Client Agreements. She made herself an Americano. She stood at her kitchen window, looking at the city, her city, for 3 minutes. Then she went back to work. On the 44th day after Adiz left Hansung, there was a quarterly review in the analytics division. Choi Byung-soo presented the risk summary. Halfway through, a senior associate raised his hand and asked a technical question about model variance. Byung-soo looked at the slide. Then he looked at Oh Seong-min. The room waited. On the 44th day after Adiz left, at that same hour, she was on a video call with her 5th client, a fund manager in Abuja who had been referred through her father's network, walking them through a volatility model she had built from scratch over the previous 2 weeks. When she finished, the client said, "This is exactly what we needed." And she said, "I know." And she closed her notebook. She had always known. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, because every week we tell the stories of people who built quietly and moved loudly. Like this video if Adiz reminded you of someone you know, or someone you are. And drop a comment below. What is the one thing you've been building in silence? We read every single one.